Hello, and thank you everybody for joining us at Driven 2021. Welcome to today's episode featuring BP3's intelligent document processing wizard, Tom Wilger. Before I hand things off to Krista, I want to encourage you to use our chat feature to ask any questions that may arise during our interview. And please be sure to join us at the end as Tom and Krista answer questions from the chat live. Also in the chat, I have placed a link to register for the live raffle of Beats EarPods. It's important that you use your work email when registering for the raffle, as we must comply with corporate and government guidelines. With all of that, I'll go ahead and pass things off to Krista.
Thanks, Julia, and thank you all for joining us today. So as Julia mentioned, I'm Krista White. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at BP3 Global. And although Intelligent Document Processing Wizard is a good term for Tom Wilger, Tom is actually our Vice President of Artificial Intelligence here at BP3. So thanks, Tom, for sitting down with us and chatting with us about artificial intelligence and intelligent document processing. So we're really excited to hear. Let's start with a basic question. What is intelligent document processing, or as we in the biz and in the know call it IDP?
Okay, that's a good question. So really intelligent document processing, or IDP as we like to call it, it really starts with another acronym, OCR. And so OCR, which means optical character recognition, is really this process that we use for looking at an image of a document or a page of a document and extracting out and figuring out what are all the words in that document and where are they living on the page. And so actually this technology has been around for a really long time. Actually, it was invented by a guy back in 1914, which he actually used to read characters and then turn them into telegraph code, but that's a whole other conversation. But anyway, so OCR has been around for a long time, and there's been a lot of solutions built around doing that. But what intelligent document processing does sort of beyond OCR is that at first it takes that OCR data, the words on the page and where they are and what they are, and then it uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand the relationships between those words and then extract the data. So for instance, I might have a form that has on it a field or a label that says name, and then what it's supposed to be doing is extracting the couple of words next to it that may say Tom Wilger. And so that's really where the AI is working with the OCR to create the full solution.
Okay, well, so let's talk about these OCR solutions because they seem like they're kind of household names. What are some of the OCR solutions that are out there?
Oh, there are a lot of them. So probably one of the best known one is something called Tesseract, which was actually owned by Google. I think that's been around for a number of years, and it's actually an open source tool. But then, Google then came up with sort of the next generation of that. They call their Vision API, and that's pretty much replaced Tesseract. There is one called Textract that's owned by AWS. Microsoft Azure has their computer vision, and then I think there's another one called FineReader that's from a company called Abby. So there's lots of them to choose from.
So those seem like relatively known products. How does BP3 recommend people using these? Where do we find these OCR engines? What do we do with them?
Well, Krista, the newer OCR engines are all really good. Some are better than others at certain types of images. So when we think about images for character recognition, we're talking about handwriting or checkboxes, things like that. So really what happens is the first step of the process is we're going to pick one of those, or maybe we even pick two of them, depending upon what types of images that we're going to be extracting from. But then for the actual data extraction, there's different types of AI models that we might use depending upon the type of document that we're extracting. So for instance, if we were extracting data from a form, like we were talking about before, you might use a machine learning model that's trained to recognize key value pairs, like when we talked about the name and then the name title and then the actual name on it. But at the end of the day, there's lots of ways to get all of this done. And, whose OCR engine you pick or which machine learning models you use really isn't nearly as important as what you're going to do next with the data that you're extracting. So believe it or not, most people are not extracting data from documents just to extract the data. You extract data from documents because those documents intersect a business process that you want to automate.
So I understand now. So let's talk about, I guess, some of the use cases then. What are some use cases that you've seen where people have now extracted the data? So that was the easy part, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're on to using that data. How are people using that data?
Right. So we've got customers that we're extracting data from loan origination documents like applications, W-2s, payment stubs, all of that stuff, and then basically using that to kick off or to manage an automated underwriting process. So the process is really that they're working on is the automated underwriting, and the data extraction is all these loan origination documents. We've got other customers who were extracting data out of things like patient medical records, and then using that to automate processes around revenue cycle management. We even have customers that we extract data out of invoices that are coming from their vendors, and then we use that to automate the accounts payable processes.
Okay, so what makes for a good use case? I mean, we've mentioned accounts payable, we've mentioned invoice processing, you've mentioned forms. What should people, if people are looking to do intelligent document processing, what actually makes for a good use case then? Okay.
Well, I mean, one of the things that you need to be, probably the first place to start is that you really need to be thinking about what am I actually doing with the data? What's the process that I'm really trying to automate? And then as you're sort of working through that, what you really want to try to understand is what is the return on the investment of automating that process? So you're going to be thinking of things like, what are the costs? What's the volume of those processes? So for instance, I might not be interested in automating a process if I'm only doing it once a year because the return on investment might not be very good. But if I've got a process that I need to do over and over again, and it's very critical that I do it in a timely manner, then that's probably a good candidate. And so any type of process that's worth automating where there are documents that are intersecting those processes, those are typically the types of things that we're looking for that are really good candidates for automation.
Tom, tell me how customers are going about actually understanding the return on investment here.
Well, first, what's important is that we need to understand the processes that the process that the customer wants to automate. And really from a data extraction perspective, the documents that intersect those processes. And so to do that, we actually will go through and model the process end to end. And then once we've gone through and modeled that process, we're able to take a look at each one of the tasks and identify the value that that task brings to the organization, as well as the cost that may be incurred by that task. And then at the end, we can pull all that information together by looking at the costs and the benefits, as well as the volume of the number of instances of those processes that we're executing in a period of time, say a year, and then we can come up with what the overall return on investment is.
So, Tom, I've seen a lot of these solutions other places. What makes BP3's approach to this different?
Well, so we've been doing process automation for a really long time. And so we've seen a lot of business processes that are unique to different customers, but then we've also seen a lot of common processes that can benefit from automation. So for some of the more common document-related business processes like automating payment processing, we have created prepackaged solutions that include everything from receiving the vendor's email to extracting the invoice data to even sending some of the data to our document review team within our support organization when it doesn't quite look right, in order to get human eyes on those that we can improve the overall accuracy. But the beauty of all of this, these prepackaged solutions for our customers, is that they don't have to worry about all of that. We're able to process thousands of incoming documents, usually within minutes of receiving them. And this allows our customers to optimize their payment process to best manage their cash flow and then take advantage of other items like payment discounts from their vendors.
So just to paraphrase, we have taken essentially invoice processing from hundreds of clients and distilled it down to the key steps, prepackaged that, added some artificial intelligence to it, and have it as a solution you can buy.
That's right.
So how does someone get started with these solutions?
Well, the easiest way is for people to reach out and contact us on BP3.com. And then what we'll do is we'll have one of our document engineers sit down and do a free 3-hour assessment of your process, the data extraction needs, and then help you figure out and understand what's the return on investment that you can expect from automating those processes.
Well, Tom, I'm going to take us over to the live Q&A because I think there's a lot of questions that are going to come in about this. So thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing this information. Viewers, stay tuned as we transition to the live Q&A with Tom. Look out for the link in the chat box right now for the Beats noise canceling earphones. Due to the nature of this raffle, you must use your work email to register to win, as we must comply with government and corporate guidelines. So thanks, Tom, and I'll see you over in the live chat.
All right, Tom. Well, that was a really good conversation. And as I predicted, there are a bunch of questions coming into the chat right now. So let's get started. So OCR, let's start with the first one. OCR has obviously been evolving for a long time. Do you think it'll continue to evolve past where it is today? I hope so.
I hope so too. I think that's probably kind of a given. What's really interesting is that probably in the last 3 or 4 years, OCR has moved into intelligent document processing, and it's really the AI has improved so much that people are getting a whole lot more value out of these tools. And so I think what that's done is it's sort of caused a resurgence of doing things with documents, extracting data from those, and it's something that's moving really fast.
So to follow up that question, I guess this is a good follow-up question, and the next question that came in, why do you think IDP has gained so much recent popularity then?
Well, I think it really comes down to the AI that's advanced, so more specifically, advancements in natural language processing and vision-based AI models, machine learning models. It's really accelerated the value that these solutions can provide. And really makes it, when we were talking about, what kinds of use cases that we're trying to solve with this, it really adds a whole nother level of use cases that we can solve because the return on the investment is so much better. So the cost for executing these solutions and the AI that's involved with them has gone down, and the accuracy has gone up in such a way that we're able to get a lot more return on the investment for a lot of these other use cases that before just really wasn't worth it.
Yeah, so I guess this begs the question, and I was talking about this earlier today with a healthcare client, and we were discussing doctors' handwriting. And of course, handwriting recognition is a really big point, especially when you're trying to verify billing or trying to verify services that were performed. So this is the question that came in just now is, can IDP also extract data from low resolution faxed or distorted images? I'm going to say doctors' handwriting in general is a distorted image. So what is,
maybe by definition?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's interesting is, I can't tell you how many documents I look at from our different customers, because they'll say, hey, can you read something off of this, or this form here, oh, and there's some handwriting here, and this has been crossed out, and all of that. And I've really been amazed by how well some of these OCR engines like AWS Textract and some of the others can pick up elements from some of these distorted images, if you will. So that, especially on the handwriting, but even if you're looking at things like faxes where the resolution is really low, or sometimes we'll have, I don't have one on my desk. I just processed all my receipts a few minutes ago and I threw them away, but they can be really hard to read. But what's really important is that to be able to recognize these. So these OCR engines can pick up a lot, and they do a pretty good job, but they don't get everything right, especially when the images are really distorted. So what's really important, though, is to be able to recognize when the IDP engine or the OCR part of the IDP engine gets it wrong. So, and when that happens, what we do is we pull together these solutions. We've got humans, our document review team, and what they can do is when the engine recognizes that it didn't do such a good job, or it didn't make a lot of sense, or maybe we've got some logic in there that says, hey, I'm supposed to get a date here and it doesn't really look like a date. What we're able to do is the solution then is able to forward that document over to our document review team, and they can fix it. And what that means for the end consumer of that data is that they really don't have to care about that the image that came in was of poor quality. They're just getting this clean data that they can then use for, processing along in further with some type of automation.
And I want to give a shout out to the BP3 document review team. They are doing amazing work right now for a lot of clients, so very exciting. So the next question that came in was, which technologies besides OCR are applied to develop the IDP solution?
That's a good question. I mean, some of the obvious things that everyone talks about, and I think is sort of the center, the star on the stage is, all the different kinds of machine learning models, such as natural language processing models, which are really dealing with understanding how sentences and words go together. But then also vision-based models that are looking at sort of, I like to look at it and they say, what's a vision-based model going to be doing? It's like, well, if you had an invoice, if everybody pictures in their mind what an invoice was, they kind of squint their eyes when they look at it. There's a certain structure and a certain layout to them. And those vision-based models are able to say, oh, well, yeah, so up here in the upper left-hand corner of the invoice is usually where the vendor's logo is and all of that. So it's things like those natural language processing models and vision-based models that are really the star on this. But then the other thing that makes these solutions actually work, and what we found makes them work at scale, is other technologies like, for instance, serverless cloud technologies. And what those allow us to do in those solutions is they allow things to scale up and down depending upon the volume. So we have customers that, they get documents are coming in and we're processing those documents and we're doing thousands and thousands of them a day, but they don't all come in at an even tempo. So, they're not coming in, if you take, okay, if it's 5,000 documents a day, I can divide that by 24 hours and come up with, the number of documents per hour. Now they come in and like this big old clump of them come in the morning, and then they start to tail off, and then there's a bunch in the afternoon. But what these serverless technologies allow us to do is it allows that pipeline to scale from being able to handle, one or two at a time, and we're not using a lot of compute resources, to being able to very quickly scale up automatically and be able to handle thousands of them within a couple of minutes. And then once that volume goes down, those serverless resources start to scale down, and we don't incur the cost, and the customer doesn't incur the cost for keeping all of that infrastructure running all at once. So it's kind of a combination of things that are really making these solutions interesting.
So you're talking about what makes it work, but what really makes it worth it? So where are people seeing the most ROI from these IDP solutions?
I would say it's probably on the big side of it. You just really have to think of ROI as it's just arithmetic, right? I mean, you've got processes that are either costing you money or making you money. and then the number of times that you're executing those processes in a period of time, like a year, are then driving as well. So you're basically taking the amount of cost or the amount of value that you're getting out of something and multiplying it times the number of instances. So, when we look at the types of use cases that really have a lot of ROI, most of them are high volume ones, like transactions, like invoice processing, or we talked a little bit about doing revenue recognition for or revenue cycle management, I guess it is, for healthcare payers, for instance, and they're doing tens of thousands of transactions a day. And so those are pretty easy because they're really high volume. And so you can say, well, gosh, if each one of these is worth maybe let's say $100 to my organization, and you multiply that times 1,000, then right there you've got 100,000. So it's really either the high volume transactions that you're going to be that may have a small dollar value to you, or then there's a few things that are more lower volume but have a lot of value or a lot of cost can be incurred. An example of that might be looking at contracts. Is one of the things that we've been starting to do, is using these technologies to read unstructured data and to read contracts and be able to pull out key pieces of information out of those contracts, so that when an attorney or a paralegal is able to then put eyes on it, we can direct them to very specific parts of the contract. So instead of spending maybe an hour reading it, they can go through that contract and find be able to see the important points on it in a couple of minutes. And so then they're able to do a lot more work, and their time is very valuable. And so we're able to, improve their efficiency.
Yeah. So the next question that came in was, how easy is it to implement and maintain an IDP solution?
Well,
easy question.
What's that?
Easy question.
It is kind of, well, yeah, it is. But, as with most real AI applications, or things that we think about as we call them walking across the street AI, sort of just basic pedestrian AI things, an effective IDP solution is this very tightly coupled orchestration of people. We talked about our document review team, the process, which is not just the data extraction, but then all the automation that you're doing, and then technology. And a lot of the machine learning technologies in these solutions have actually really been commoditized by the big cloud providers, which actually from our perspective is great, because they're able to put a lot of money into advancing those technologies and then offering them up to us. But what I've been told by our IDP customers is that the real value of especially like the prepackaged solutions that we offer for like invoice processing, you might say, is that we're able to pull together the people and the processes and all these technologies in such a way that from their perspective, it all just works seamlessly. And so they don't really have to think about being able to curate all of this and pull it together and hire the staff and train everybody to operate it on a day-to-day basis. Because we're basically able to sell that to them and give that to them basically on a cost per document basis.
Yeah. So one of my favorite emails that I've received recently was our customer's comment that just said, "Yeah, I was surprised. It just worked." So it felt like we took a lot of burden off their team that way. So the next question is, can IDP be integrated into my existing infrastructure?
Oh, yeah. And, that's actually really what's most important. As, we've talked about a lot, is that we don't really extract data from documents just to extract data from documents, right? The main idea here is that we want to be able to use them within some type of automation. And so that actually works really well because the tools that we use for building out these automations integrate so well into lots of different infrastructures. So, we have 8 ways of integrating both the IDP processes as well as the automations using, APIs into the existing infrastructure. We've got tools like business process automation, tools like maybe Camunda that we can use. And then we have RPA tools that we leverage like Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and Blue Prism, for instance. So lots of options for how to do that. And, there's pretty much, we haven't really come across one lately. And I don't think that we actually couldn't automate because there's just so many possibilities.
Well, and I like the idea of being able to use the existing technology that I have and integrating this new workflow patterns and using these human in the loop. I mean, I'm going to say human in the loop, and you might want to take a second to explain that to us. But with the BP3 document team, that is a human in the loop workflow that says, okay, this one, we're not 100% sure. Let's send it over to the document team. Can you take a second to explain the way that the workflow actually works with our document handling teams?
Oh, absolutely. So I think that's probably, that's the piece that I'm kind of most excited about, because it's leveraging people to do what they do best. And we're letting the AI do what it does best. So basically what ends up happening is that when the IDP engine is extracting all of these different fields from the document, we get back lots of other information as well on that extraction. So we may look at it and say, well, on the OCR side, we have thresholds or measurements that we could use to say that, this doesn't look like number 6. I think it's a 6. It's the best I can do, but I may be only 20% certain. Or we might even have within the other parts of the extraction where we can look at and we can have scores on those that say, well, this looks like a person's name, but it's not a name that I've ever seen before. And so that's going to probably give it a lower score. And so we take all of those lower scored items that we're extracting, and then maybe even some specific logic that we put into post-processing, where we might look at combinations of elements that we're extracting and say, if I've got this and this going on, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm going to take that particular piece and I'm going to take that as well as anything else that's on that document that we're not so sure of. And we're going to give it to the humans, and we're going to let them, it's going to basically come up on their screen. And on one side of the screen, they have an image of that document and they can zoom in and move around. And then on the other side, it has only the specific elements that we want them to look at that we're not sure about. And so basically, when they look at one of those elements, they can actually click on it and it will highlight it in the document. It says, yeah, I'm not sure about this. And so then they'll go in and fix that and then basically move on to the next thing. So even in the case where we have to have a human go through most of a document that, maybe half the elements they need to review, which is pretty uncommon. But if they had to do that, even that, they're able to do that so quickly that the overall process, it doesn't really slow anything down. So they're able to go through hundreds of these in a day. And it makes the overall flow look, is highly accurate for the customer. But then we're using people where that makes sense. And then we're using the AI where that makes a lot more sense.
And it's my understanding then once the human in the loop goes and says, this is a 9, it's not a 6, then the machine using that NLP and I guess more AI behind it, this walking across the street AI that we talk about, will actually learn, okay, this is what a 9 looks like.
Right.
So it becomes, over time, the number of human interactions becomes less, right?
It does to some extent. And, that's what's interesting is there's so many different ways of drawing a 9. And it does get the machine learning models get better and better over time as you give it more training data. And so that's pretty exciting. But, at the end, eventually that stuff the performance of the AI starts to taper off. It doesn't taper off, it plateaus, you could say. And because, there's still going to be documents that you're looking at that, just for one reason or another are going to be difficult to read. And I think that's really where, you start looking about where things are going in the future. And that's really, it's as the AI gets not just better trained, but the technologies get better. I think that's where we'll start to see even more, a more improvement in the accuracy that's coming off of those machine learning models.
Well, Tom, I love the work that you and your team has been doing. It has generated a lot of very positive customer references for our marketing team. So everyone should be on the lookout for those client stories. But thank you. And thank you to viewers for joining us for the 7th and final episode of Driven 2021 series. Our random selection raffle has selected James Andrews as the winner of the Beats earbuds this week. Congratulations, and we'll be reaching out to you shortly. We hope that you enjoyed the Driven series and have learned some tips and tricks that you can take into the future. Don't forget, you can go back and watch any of the past Driven episodes on the BP3 YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the BP3 YouTube channel so that you know when new videos hit our channel too. You can find the videos from Camunda, LabCorp, TTI, our RPA expert panel, and this IDP video as well. Also be on the lookout for the conference t-shirt sent directly to your door if you haven't already gotten yours. We'll be sending the next round of t-shirts next week. Sorry, Tom, you were going to jump in there.
I got mine.
Yeah. They come in rounds, so people are getting them all the time. Well, with that, thank you for participating, and I hope everyone has a great holiday season. And thank you again, Tom. This was really informative about the IDP solution from BP3.